Dawn of the Guardians, by Stephen Lake. The Guardian Series Part 4. Paul tromped noisily into Guardian headquarters and plopped down on a sofa that rested in one corner of the waiting room. As he did, the office secretary looked up at him over her thin, horn-rimmed glasses, and studied his tired, exhausted expression. "Tough day?" she asked with a grin. Paul groaned in reply. "Ugh, we got our butts kicked out there. That eye of darkness we fought was no joke. We got it dealt with, but man, that dude don't play," he groaned. The secretary chuckled. "I can imagine. So, you up for another assignment?" she asked. Paul slowly raised his head and glared at her in disbelief. "You're joking. I just got back." "At least give the dead some time to rest in peace," he moaned. He then laid his head back on the couch as he tried to relax. "Actually, I think you'll like this assignment. We just picked up a group of newbies from the recruiting team, and the director wants you to apprentice one of them," said the secretary. Paul groaned at this. "No rest for the wicked, he muttered. He sighed, and soon replied, Fine, I'll do it." "So who's my latest victim?" "Destin Whitman, reporting for duty, sir," came a shout from across the room. Paul groaned. "Great, another overwound academy graduate," he muttered. He then sat up, opened his eyes, and looked over towards a young man who was wearing a military dress uniform. This made Paul cock an eyebrow in disbelief. "Seriously? What's up with the outfit?" he asked incredulously. "That's your new apprentice," grinned the secretary. Paul glared at her in disbelief for several moments before turning back to the young man, sighing in frustration as he did. "I swear the director hates me," he muttered. "He doesn't hate you. He just likes to give his toughest assignments to his best guardians," grinned the secretary. "I rest my case," groaned Paul. The secretary chuckled at this. "Sir, what would you like me to do for you, sir?" barked the man. Paul smirked at the young man as he chuckled in amusement. "You can relax, son. This isn't the army you're in," he replied. "Sir, no, sir. I'm from the U.S. Marine Corps, sir. I was sent here by my gunny on orders from our lieutenant to report to you for debriefing, sir," barked the man. Paul laughed at this as he rubbed his eyes incredulously. "At ease, son, at ease," he replied. However, rather than the young man relaxing as he'd intended, he instead assumed a military at-ease posture. Paul looked at this in disbelief. "Seriously? What is this guy? G.I. Joe or something?" he thought. "By at ease, I meant that you can relax and sit down," he then said. The young man immediately snapped to attention, and then sat down across from Paul. But it was clear to him that his new apprentice was not going to relax anytime soon. Paul chuckled at this. He then looked at the secretary, and asked, "So how long do I have to get him up to speed?" "The director didn't say. He just told me to assign him to you, and that's all," said the secretary. Paul looked back at the young man for a moment and thought about this. "What's your name, son?" he asked. "Corporal Whitman, sir," said the young man. Paul looked at the young man's uniform and saw that, yes, the name tag did agree with that statement. He again chuckled. Whoever this kid was, he was a by-the-books Marine for sure. That was both a good thing, and a bad one at the same time. "What's your first name?" he asked. "Destin, sir." Paul smiled at the young man, and replied, "All right, Destin. How about you go change into something more comfortable and we can start your apprenticeship?" "Sir, yes, sir." As Destin stood before him in a military at-ease posture, Paul looked at the young man and cocked an eyebrow in both disbelief and amusement. "Not what I had in mind, but I guess it'll work," he thought. Normally a military PT uniform wasn't something he'd consider as being more comfortable. But, if that's what Destin wanted to wear, then he was okay with allowing it. The only other thing he had to do now was get poor Destin to relax a little. "So, Destin, how long have you been like this?" he asked. "Like what, sir?" asked Destin. "Your powers. How long have you had them?" "About 8 weeks, sir." Paul pondered this briefly. Ah, so you're one of the recent late bloomers, he replied. Late bloomers, sir? Asked Destin in confusion. Yeah, someone whose powers manifested later on, rather than right at the beginning of all this crazy cross-dimensional war stuff. So, how did you first discover you had superpowers? PT, sir. I normally run a 5-minute mile. However, on the day they activated, I was able to run a 30-second mile and then a 15-second one after that, sir. Paul chuckled. I bet your sergeant was a bit surprised, he said. Destin grinned. Gunny was impressed, sir. Paul again laughed. I bet he was. Well, that being said, let's see if you can impress me too. Since I don't know the full scope of your abilities just yet, even though I can sense a fairly potent energy well within you, let's start out with a test of your strength, he said. He soon set himself into a ready posture, built up his energy, and prepared his body for the worst. He then held out his hands and barricaded himself behind several layers of reinforcement, strengthening, and shielding. If the kid could get through that, he would be impressed. All right, hit me with everything you've got, said Paul. Destin looked at him in confusion. You actually want me to punch you, sir? He asked. Yeah. Hit me as hard as you can. Destin briefly hesitated to do this, but went forward anyways as it was a direct order. So if Paul got himself hurt, then that was on him. As you wish, sir, he replied. Destin set himself into a ready position as well, as though preparing to throw the world's most epic MMA punch. He then drew in a deep breath, and cocked his arm back. A moment later his body erupted with a yellow, fire-like energy. Paul was impressed at this. Ah, the kid's already got some decent control over his power. That's good, he thought. Destin then swung at Paul's hands with all his strength and hit them like a hammer striking an anvil. The sheer force of the impact reverberated across Paul's shields, but didn't move them at all. He grinned with satisfaction at this. Destin was strong, but clearly not anywhere near his level. However, that didn't mean that Paul wasn't impressed. Especially since the force of the blow cracked the ground they were standing on and shook the trees and dirt around them as though a bomb had gone off. After completing his punch, Destin backed up and grimaced in pain as the blow, while highly powerful, had deeply injured his hand and arm. Paul soon lowered his defenses and studied the area around him. Where once there had been grass under their feet, there was now nothing but empty, bare ground that spread out at least 20 or 30 feet in every direction. Even a few of the nearby shrubs had been stripped bare of their leaves by the incredible blast wave of energy that the punch had created. And some of that was Paul's fault, as his shields, being both deflective and ablative, had dumped most of the energy from the punch into the surrounding area. While this wasn't very good for the local greenery, it did make his shields more durable and survivable in a fight. Especially when large amounts of energy, such as this, were involved. Not bad. Not bad at all. For a late bloomer, you're pretty strong, said Paul happily. Thank you, sir. However, I didn't expect that punch to hurt so much, replied Destin as he held his injured arm and hand painfully. Paul waved dismissively at this. That's to be expected. I haven't taught you how to use your self-reinforcement and hardening skills yet. So what just happened is kinda expected. But, that being said, to deliver a punch that strong, and not have your entire arm collapse, or disintegrate, is pretty impressive. He then walked over and healed Destin's hand and arm, much to the young man's surprise. You can heal people? He asked in amazement. Oh, that's only the start of what I can do. I mean, guys like me don't spend all day, every day, going around beating up Rexes and bulls. Some of us have normal hobbies, like going around every day and beating up Rexes and bulls, chided Paul. This drew a grin from Destin. I'm sure you do, sir. So, may I ask, when did you get your powers? Paul furrowed his brow with a grin. Believe it or not, mine showed up the day the first portal opened. I was among the early ones who got them that day, and one of several in my city who did as well. We also had to fight a bunch of Rexes that day as well. It was definitely a crazy start to my life as a guardian, to say the least. Every one of us was as green as a leaf on that day, and yet we still somehow drove back that initial wave of invading Rexes. And I can't say that it was easy, either. We absolutely got our butts kicked. But, in the end, we won, and that's what counts. Congratulations, sir, that's impressive, said Destin. Paul chuckled. If you think that was impressive, then you should stick around for a while. We've got even better monkey tricks than that, he chided. Destin laughed. I look forward to it, sir. Now, if I may ask, sir, who exactly are we fighting in this war? Paul looked at Destin in surprise. Has nobody ever told you? He asked. Destin shook his head. No, sir, I was never briefed on that. Sir, I know a few things, but not a lot. Paul rubbed his chin as he pondered how to answer this. Where to begin? Well, I guess starting at the very, very beginning, before all of this started, is as good a place as any. You know about the portals, right? Destin nodded. I've heard of them, sir. All right, basically the way this war works is this. Sometime in the past how would I describe him? I guess we can just call him the Emperor of Ashes, as he doesn't really have an official name just yet, as we only heard about him secondhand, and haven't actually encountered him in person, which is kind of a good thing, from what I understand. Anyhow, basically, whoever this Joker is, who runs the organization that's attacking Earth, he's evil incarnate, and destroys every world and dimension he touches. That's why he's coming after us. Well, one of several reasons. The other is that the dimension he's currently in is almost completely drained of energy, whereas ours is still super rich in the resource. Hence why we exist, and why he's coming after us. I found out some of that by accident not long back during a fight I was having with some Rexes. Before then we didn't know why we were being targeted. It wasn't until I followed some idiots through a portal to the other side that I discovered what the main driving force was behind their actions. Basically, what we're fighting is a resource war. We have the resources, and they want them badly. Destin looked at Paul in surprise. You've been to the other side, he said in amazement. Paul rolled his eyes. Unfortunately, yes, and it's as dead as a casket over there. I went in with a good reserve of energy, and found the place to be completely devoid of the stuff. I got out of there as fast as I could and back to our side of things. So, compared to them, we're a full tank of gas, whereas they've got their needle buried deep in the red as they're literally on fumes over there. That's why he's so desperate to conquer our world. Without it, they're dead. The only thing I don't think he counted on when he opened his first portal was that his doing so would create us. Even so, I don't think we've even begun to see just how absolutely ugly this war will eventually become. I mean, from all I've heard, if the big guy that's running that clown show on the other side ever crosses over here at any point, and gets himself a full tank of gas, we're all gonna be in the hurt, and then some. Destin nodded. I understand, sir, and I'm ready to fight, and die for my country if need be. Paul smiled. It's a good thing that you are. However, in the end, I think we'll be more than just fighting for our respective countries. We'll instead be fighting for the future of our entire planet because, if we don't stop him soon, Earth is toast. If we have sufficient force, we can easily hold them back. Paul frowned. Yeah, that's the problem. We don't. Destin furrowed his brow at this. What do you mean? How many of us are there? He asked. A few thousand at most, which means we're spread pretty thin at the moment, leaving us barely able to keep up with what's coming through as it is. Even worse, we recently got in a spat with one of those Eye of Darkness things, and got our butts kicked. I mean, we won, but it took 41 of us ganging up on the thing just to beat it. That's why, given how few of us there are, if they start sending in bigger guns than that, we're all toast. That sounds somewhat desperate, sir, said Destin. Paul shrugged. It is, but we'll make it work. That's also where guys like you come in. The more of us who appear, the greater our numbers will be when all of this comes to a final showdown. Given the desperate resource situation for the guys on the other side, I can't see this war going on for too much longer without a decisive endgame. Especially if we keep having more and more people like ourselves popping up as time goes on. That means he's gonna have to go big at some point if he wants to win. We're all hoping that, when that time comes, we can successfully stop him. Destin smiled. I'll do my best to help with that, sir, he said. Oh, I fully expect you to. Yes, sir. And one other thing, if I may ask, sir, where were you when you first got your powers? Like, what were you doing? Asked Destin. Paul laughed. Would you believe I was having an argument with a fax machine when I bloomed? That sucker never saw it coming. Destin snickered. I assume it didn't survive? Paul smiled. Nope. I punched that fax machine in a fit of rage and left a 6-foot hole in the wall behind it. Never did find out where that sucker went, though. Destin laughed. That had to have been quite a sight, sir. Oh, it was. The best part is, when my boss saw me do that, it so freaked him out that he never yelled at me ever again. I bet, grinned Destin. Yep, that was definitely a memorable day for sure. But, enough of me. You're here to learn how to use and control your powers. So let's get started by figuring out what abilities you have, and then do some drills to help you expand and fine-tune your energy control. Around here we prefer sharp spears over big hammers. So the better you become at managing your powers, the better a fighter you'll be. You ready? Sir, yes, sir, barked Destin with glee. Paul smiled. That's good to hear. Now stop calling me sir. I work for a living, he chided. Destin chuckled. Yes, sir.